Alexander Thornton stands at the glass, a silhouette of tailored perfection, 6 feet 2 inches of calculated ambition, wrapped in a Tom Ford suit that costs more than most people's monthly salary. His dark hair is graying prematurely at the temples, a testament to the ruthless decade he spent building Thornton Global Industries from a modest family investment firm into a $20 billion empire. At 42, he possesses the sharp-edged handsomeness of old money and new power, his steel gray eyes reflecting nothing but the cold mathematics of profit and loss. Alexander doesn't do sentiment, he does strategy. Marriage is a business transaction, Alexander says flatly to his lawyer, Marcus Chen, who sits across from him in the minimalist office where every surface is black marble or brushed steel. Nothing more, nothing less. I need an heir. A legitimate one. The board won't accept anything else, and I won't give them ammunition to question my succession plan. Marcus adjusts his glasses, his expression betraying nothing. He's been Alexander's legal counsel for 15 years, long enough to know that arguing with Alexander Thornton is like arguing with a glacier, cold, immovable, and ultimately futile. I've prepared the contract as you specified. 1-year minimum duration, prenuptial agreement ironclad. She retains no claim to company assets. Termination clause activated upon successful birth of an heir. The compensation package is generous. Alexander turns from the window, his jaw set like carved granite. $5 million for 1 year of her time and the production of an heir. It's more than generous. It's obscene, but it's necessary. He pauses, something flickering behind those gray eyes. Not doubt, never doubt, but perhaps the faintest acknowledgement of the darkness of his own desperation. Tell me about her again. Marcus slides a folder across the desk. Inside is a photograph of Elena Reeves. She's 34, with delicate features that could be mistaken for fragility. Dark hair swept back in a simple style. Intelligent brown eyes behind modest frames, a slight frame that suggests she spends more time in libraries than gyms. She looks like a woman who could disappear into a crowd, who could be overlooked, underestimated. Which is precisely why Alexander chose her. MBA from Stanford, summa cum laude, PhD in economic theory from MIT. Currently employed as a senior analyst at Meridian Consulting, though she's significantly overqualified for the position. No family connections, no social media presence, no scandals. She's brilliant, discreet, and according to your specifications, forgettable. Marcus clears his throat. She's also in significant debt from her mother's medical bills. Stage 4 cancer. The mother passed away 6 months ago. Alexander picks up the photograph, studying it with the same intensity he applies to quarterly earnings reports. She'll agree? My contacts at Meridian indicate she's been living on ramen noodles and working double shifts. $5 million will erase her debt and give her a fresh start. She'll agree, and she does. 3 days later, Elena Reeves sits in that same black marble office, her hands folded in her lap, her expression carefully neutral, as Alexander outlines the terms. He speaks to her the way one might speak to a contractor hired to renovate a bathroom, clinical, detached, utterly transactional. She will live in the guest wing of his estate. They will appear together at necessary social functions. They will consummate the marriage as required to produce an heir. Once the child is born and paternity established, she will receive her compensation and exit his life with a non-disclosure agreement, preventing her from ever speaking of the arrangement. Do you understand the terms? Alexander asks, not quite meeting her eyes. Elena's voice is soft, almost musical, but there's something beneath it, something Alexander doesn't quite catch. I understand perfectly, Mr. Thornton. This is a business arrangement. You need an heir. I need financial stability. We both get what we want. She signs the contract with a steady hand. Alexander watches her signature flow across the page, elegant, confident, nothing like the timid mouse he expected. For just a moment, he wonders if he's made a mistake. But then Marcus is notarizing the document, and the deal is done, and Alexander Thornton returns to what he does best, building his empire, one cold calculation at a time. The wedding is a quiet affair at City Hall. No guests, no celebration. Just two strangers binding themselves together with legal documents and hollow vows. Elena wears a simple cream dress. Alexander wears his usual armor of tailored perfection. They sign the marriage certificate with the same emotional investment one brings to a rental agreement. 6 weeks into their arrangement, Alexander begins to notice something strange. The quarterly projections for Thornton Global's new biotech division are exceeding expectations by 17%. The senior vice president of acquisitions, Richard Dalton, attributes it to aggressive market positioning, but Alexander built this company by understanding every variable. There's something he's missing. It's during a late-night review of investment portfolios that he finds the first thread, a memo, buried in the weekly reports, suggesting a pivot away from traditional pharmaceutical partnerships toward emerging gene therapy startups. The recommendation had come through channels, filtered through 3 different departments before reaching his desk. He'd approved it, thinking it aligned with his own instincts. But now, tracing the paper trail backward through the digital labyrinth of corporate communications, he finds the original suggestion came from an external consultant's report, a report Elena had delivered to Richard Dalton over coffee at a bistro near the office. Alexander knows this because Richard mentioned it in passing during a board meeting, something about, "That brilliant woman you married, Alex, gave me some fascinating insights into the biotech sector." Alexander says nothing. He watches. 3 weeks later, Thornton Global narrowly avoids a disastrous investment in a European manufacturing concern. The deal had looked perfect on paper: solid fundamentals, experienced management, promising market position. Alexander had been hours away from signing when an anonymous report landed on his desk, highlighting hidden debt structures and questionable accounting practices buried deep in the company's subsidiaries. The report was forensically detailed, the kind of analysis that takes weeks of meticulous research. He traces it back. The report was delivered by Marcus, who received it from a paralegal, who found it in his inbox with a note saying it might be relevant to the Thornton account. The paralegal doesn't remember who sent it, but when Alexander checks the metadata on the digital file, he finds something interesting. The document was created on a laptop registered to Elena Reeves. She never mentions it. When he sees her at dinner that evening, one of their carefully orchestrated appearances of domestic normalcy, she discusses the weather, asks politely about his day, and retires to her wing of the house without ever hinting that she just saved Thornton Global from a $100 million catastrophe. Alexander begins to pay attention. Really pay attention. He notices that Elena spends her days in the estate's library, her laptop always open, her eyes moving across screens filled with financial data and market analyses. She subscribes to dozens of industry publications, attends virtual conferences under pseudonyms, and maintains a network of contacts that seems to span every major financial center in the world. When they attend charity galas or corporate events, she fades into the background. But Alexander starts noticing how strategically she fades, always near the right conversations, always listening to the right people, her quiet questions subtly extracting information that others guard jealously. The real revelation comes during the Thornton Global annual shareholder meeting. Alexander is presenting the year's achievements: record profits, successful acquisitions, market expansion into 3 new continents. He's in the middle of discussing their unexpected success in the Asian markets when a shareholder asks a pointed question about their decision to partner with a relatively unknown logistics firm in Singapore. "That was an unconventional choice," the shareholder says, skepticism dripping from every word. "Can you explain the strategic reasoning?" Alexander pauses. The truth is, the decision had come through his executive team with such unanimous support that he'd approved it without his usual scrutiny. Now, on the spot, he finds himself explaining the wisdom of the choice, the firm's innovative supply chain technology, their connections to emerging markets, their untapped potential for scaling, and as he speaks, he realizes he's parroting back arguments he heard from Elena during one of their rare dinners together. After the meeting, he corners Richard Dalton. "The Singapore logistics deal. Whose idea was that originally?" Richard looks uncomfortable. "It came through several channels, but I believe the initial recommendation came from that consulting firm your wife used to work for, Meridian. They sent over an analysis, and when we dug deeper, everything checked out." "Why? Is there a problem?" "No problem," Alexander says slowly. "No problem at all." Alexander Thornton didn't build his empire from nothing. The truth, which he carefully obscures in every profile and interview, is that Thornton Global Industries rose from the ashes of another company, Reeves Capital Management. 20 years ago, Reeves Capital was a rising star in the investment world, known for aggressive market strategies and uncanny predictive accuracy. Then, seemingly overnight, it collapsed. Bad investments, regulatory scrutiny, a cascade of failures that destroyed the company and its founders within 6 months. Alexander, then a junior analyst at a competitor firm, had watched it happen with the cold calculation of a predator sensing weakness. He'd studied their portfolio, analyzed their strategies, and when the company dissolved, he'd hired their best analysts, acquired their client list at pennies on the dollar, and built Thornton Global on the foundation of their corpse. It's a story he never tells, a triumph of opportunism that might, to less pragmatic minds, look like grave robbing. He's thinking about this history. God knows why. It's ancient history when Marcus calls him at midnight. Alexander, you need to see something. I'm sending over a file. It's complicated. The file arrives in his encrypted email. It's a corporate registration document from 23 years ago. Reeves Capital Management. 3 founders listed. And there in the middle is a name that makes Alexander's blood run cold. Jonathan Reeves, founder and chief investment strategist. Marcus, Alexander says carefully, his voice deadly quiet. Tell me about Jonathan Reeves. He was brilliant, Marcus says, one of the most innovative financial minds of his generation. The collapse of Reeves Capital destroyed him. He died 2 years later. Heart attack officially, but everyone knew it was the stress, the shame. He left behind a widow and a 10-year-old daughter. Alexander closes his eyes. What was the daughter's name? Elena Reeves. The world shifts. Alexander sits in his office, the lights of Manhattan spreading below him like a circuit board, and he understands that he's been playing checkers while someone else has been playing chess. Every move, every decision, every unexpected success, it all reorganizes in his mind with the terrible clarity of a puzzle solving itself. Elena wasn't the forgettable mouse he hired. She was the daughter of the man whose company Alexander had cannibalized. She'd spent 2 decades watching him profit from her father's destruction, studying him, learning every detail of the empire he'd built on her family's grave. And when he came looking for a convenient womb to carry his heir, she'd seen her opportunity. But the question that haunts Alexander through the sleepless night that follows is this. What exactly is her game? Revenge? Justice? Or something more complex? He finds her the next morning in the library, sunlight streaming through the windows, illuminating her face as she reads a leather-bound book. She looks up when he enters, and for the first time since he met her, he sees her truly not the facade of the quiet analyst, but something else, something dangerous. You know, Elena says softly, closing the book, I wondered how long it would take you. Alexander crosses the room slowly, his movements predatory. Everything, the consulting reports, the investments, the Singapore deal, you've been manipulating my company from the inside. Your company? Elena's smile is gentle, almost pitying. Alexander, haven't you wondered why every major decision you've made in the last year has been extraordinarily successful? Why problems solve themselves before you even identify them? Why opportunities appear exactly when you need them? You've been helping me. His voice is flat, trying to make sense of betrayal that doesn't feel like betrayal. I've been building, Elena corrects, the same way my father built, the same way you built on his ruins. She stands and somehow, despite being 8 inches shorter than him, she seems to tower over him. Every analyst you stole from Reeves Capital, I trained them first. Every strategy you discovered in those early years, my father developed them. You're not a genius, Alexander. You're a very talented thief. The words should sting, but Alexander is too busy recalculating, reassessing. What do you want? I wanted to understand you, Elena says simply. I wanted to see if the man who destroyed my family was a monster or just empty. A shell going through the motions of building an empire without understanding what it means to create something meaningful. She moves to the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. Do you know what I found? Alexander doesn't answer. I found a man so desperate for control that he'll reduce marriage to a business transaction. A man so afraid of human connection that he thinks an heir is something you can order like custom furniture. A man who built an empire but has no idea how to build a life. She turns back to him, and there's something like sadness in her eyes. You're not a monster, Alexander. You're just profoundly, tragically alone. And this is your revenge? Alexander's voice is harsh. Psychological analysis? No, Elena says quietly. This is my coronation. The file arrives on Alexander's desk 3 days later, delivered by Marcus with an expression of profound devastation. She's called an emergency board meeting. Alexander, you need to read this before the meeting. You need to prepare. The document is a masterwork of legal and financial engineering. Elena has spent the last year building a comprehensive case that Alexander Thornton is systematically mismanaging Thornton Global Industries. Every decision he's made in the past decade is re-examined through a lens of questionable judgment. The European manufacturing deal he almost signed, presented as evidence of reckless decision-making, only prevented by anonymous intervention. The Singapore logistics partnership that seems so brilliant, revealed to have been Elena's strategy, implemented through consulting channels. But the real devastation is in the ownership structure. Elena has been quietly acquiring Thornton Global stock through a series of shell companies and investment vehicles. Nothing illegal, nothing that would trigger reporting requirements, but systematic, patient, relentless. She now controls 11% of the company's outstanding shares. Combined with 3 board members she's been cultivating for months, she has enough votes to force a leadership review. The contract marriage, it turns out, was never about the money. It was about access. About proximity to the systems and people that run Thornton Global. About having a legitimate reason to be in Alexander's world. Watching, learning, positioning. The board meeting is a massacre. Elena presents her case with the quiet confidence of someone who has already won. She details Alexander's poor judgment, his emotional instability, evidenced by the bizarre contract marriage arrangement, his increasing detachment from the company's operational realities. She presents alternative strategies, her strategies that have consistently outperformed Alexander's instincts. She paints a picture of a company succeeding despite its CEO, not because of him. Gentlemen, Elena concludes, looking around the mahogany-paneled boardroom at the 15 men who have followed Alexander Thornton for years, you have a choice. Continue following a man whose greatest talent is taking credit for others' brilliance, or embrace a leadership that has already proven its worth. Every success this company has achieved in the last year came from my analysis, my strategies, my vision. I'm not asking you to take a chance on me. I'm asking you to acknowledge what's already happened. The vote is close, but it's not close enough. Elena wins by a margin of 2 votes. Alexander Thornton, for the first time in his adult life, is checkmated. 6 months later, the transformation is complete. Elena Reeves Thornton, she kept the name, which somehow makes everything worse, stands in the same penthouse office where Alexander once looked down on Manhattan like a conqueror surveying his empire. She's changed almost nothing about the space. Same black marble, same steel, same floor-to-ceiling windows. But somehow it feels entirely different. Warmer, perhaps, or maybe just less lonely. The company is thriving. Under Elena's leadership, Thornton Global has pivoted towards sustainable technologies and ethical investing. Strategies that initially alarmed the old guard but have proven extraordinarily profitable. Employee satisfaction is up 43%. The stock price has climbed 22%. Industry publications are calling it the most successful corporate transition in recent memory. Alexander watches it all from a corner office 3 floors down. He's still with the company, Elena insisted on that, and the board agreed. You're a talented analyst, she'd told him during the transition, her voice devoid of cruelty. You always were, you just mistook being good at something for being the best. There's a place for you here, if you're willing to accept it. He accepted. What choice did he have? The strange thing, the thing Alexander can't quite process, is that he's not miserable. For the first time in decades, he's not responsible for everything. He's not the one making life or death decisions about thousands of employees. He's not the one facing down shareholders and board members and the relentless pressure of maintaining an empire. He's just working, analyzing markets, making recommendations, contributing. It's almost like being human. One evening, 7 months into Elena's reign, she stops by his office. Walk with me, she says, and it's not quite an order, not quite a request. They walk through the empty executive floor, their footsteps echoing on marble. I'm pregnant, Elena says finally. Alexander stops walking. The contract, the heir, the entire reason for this arrangement. Congratulations, he manages. I'm keeping the company, Elena says, and there's steel in her voice now. The child will inherit Thornton Global when I'm gone, but under a trust structure that ensures ethical leadership. No more empire building for ego. No more treating people as transactions. I never thought otherwise, Alexander says honestly. Elena studies him in the dying light filtering through the windows. You're different, she observes. You destroyed my life. No, Elena corrects gently. I destroyed your empire. Your life? That's something you might actually be able to build now. They stand together in the gathering darkness, these two people bound by contract and betrayal, and the strange, unexpected intimacy of mutual destruction. Outside, Manhattan glitters, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out in its towers of glass and steel. Was it worth it? Alexander asks finally. All of this. Was it worth it? Elena considers the question with the seriousness it deserves. My father died believing he was a failure, that everything he built was worthless. I spent 20 years watching you profit from his genius while his name faded into obscurity. She turns to face Alexander fully. Now Thornton Global operates on principles he would have recognized. Now his strategies are shaping markets again. Now his legacy is secure. So yes, Alexander, it was worth it. She leaves him standing there, and Alexander watches her disappear down the corridor, this woman who outmaneuvered him, who turned his desperation into her opportunity, who transformed his empire into something he barely recognizes but can't quite hate. The irony is almost funny. Alexander Thornton spent his entire life trying to control everything. His company, his image, his future, even his heir, and in trying to contract for an heir, he signed away his empire to the one person on earth who understood exactly how to take it from him. In the end, control was always an illusion. But maybe, just maybe, freedom is what you find when you finally let it go. The lights of Manhattan shine on, indifferent and eternal, as Alexander Thornton walks back to his corner office and begins, for the first time in his life, to build something that isn't an empire, just a life. Small, human, and finally, genuinely his own. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.